I have a second channel, Cube Comp MTDX. Hey everybody, this video I'm going to be upgrading the MidTower Deluxe Black Max. So we're going to be upgrading from the old A series APU to a Ryzen 5 2400G APU setup. A huge improvement because that setup's getting quite dated and it's getting a bit slow. About 2 years ago or so, I tried to beef up a little bit with installing a solid state drive, and that gave us like a modest improvement in performance, but overall still not that great when it takes it's not that great when web pages take long to load and it almost seems like your internet's slow, but no, it's the computer. So the Black Max is actually not over here just yet. I'll be bringing it over tomorrow to complete this video, but I just want to go and get a head start on getting this motherboard ready to go. So this is an ASRock B50 Pro 4 motherboard. This motherboard was out of stock throughout most of the summer on Newegg, because I was actually planning on doing this upgrade back in the spring, but of course coronavirus hit and motherboard shortage was crazy. You couldn't find hardly any decent boards on Newegg. They were all out of stock. So this board here is, I think, the cheapest full-size ATX board from ASRock on Newegg. The rest of them were the micro ATX with just, many of them were just having one PCI Express 16 and PCI Express 1 slot, and I want a full ATX board just in case there was ever a need for extra expansion. So there you have it. So this board's going to be a little overkill for what we're using it for, at least for right now. We're going to be using the APU for graphics. We're not going to have a separate graphics card in this. It's just going to be very similar to how the current Black Max is. So we've got 16 gigs of DDR4 memory. We have a Ryzen 5 2400G APU. And we're also going to be installing a M.2 SSD. Okay, so I should mention that several of the parts today were donated by one of my viewers. A big thank you to the viewer who donated these parts. He donated quite a few different things. This memory, off to the left over here. This APU, which is in a different box. More on that in just a moment. 2 SSDs, one of them being a Samsung 1TB, I think is a 850 EVO, which is installed in MidTower Deluxe now. A separate 240 gig M.2 SSD, which ended up in the second TV box Slim, which is in the living room. A 64 gigabyte Samsung micro SD card. 2 different Corsair power supplies, one of which just got installed in the second MidTower Deluxe build for my friend, which is the system that the old MidTower Deluxe hardware got installed inside of. Yeah, that one. And a couple other odds and ends. Like I say, quite a few different things. And also, this practically new Gigabyte X570 Gaming X board. Now, I didn't want to use this specific board in the Black Max upgrade because, I mean, that would be let's see, that would be like trying to make a Cadillac out of a Honda Civic. I would like to use this board in a different build someday, hopefully sometime soon, and use better stuff like maybe a Ryzen 3000 series processor, good graphics card, you name it, stuff like that. This board was going to go into MidTower Deluxe, but this board does not support the first gen Ryzen chips, and actually has a little bit less I/O than the ASRock X370 killer board that's in the MidTower Deluxe. So, anyways, got this brand new board for the Black Max. So the guy who donated me this APU, my understanding, this was pulled from his computer when he upgraded from it to a I think a Ryzen 7 2700. I don't know the whole story there, but we've got the Ryzen 5 2400G APU, and we also have a brand new unused heatsink fan that I'm pretty certain came with the Ryzen 7 2700. This is one of the RGB fans, and we're going to be using it. I think it would make a nice touch to the Black Max. So, that being said, we're going to install the APU first. Now I should mention before I install this processor. Here's something pretty bizarre. Guess what I got and purchased for this upgrade. That's right, a 5.6K modem. No, my parents don't use dial-up internet. No, they don't use it. They don't use dial-up internet, but sometimes they have to fax. And also, my parents' computer, the Black Max, it has this caller ID software installed that uses the 5.6K modem to detect caller ID and also hang up on spam callers. Yeah, it's pretty freaking hilarious. So the phone will ring one time, and once it detects that it's a blocked number, it picks up and hangs up the phone. So I had to make sure that functionality would continue to work. That way, tech support scammers and telemarketers and all those people who like to call my parents, they just get hung up on. Alright, so we're going to drop in the APU. And since, of course, it was a used pull, go ahead and clean the surface of it with some rubbing alcohol. And I'm pretty sure that he used a better cooling setup, such as maybe a liquid cooling setup with his current CPU. So here it is, a brand new AMD Ryzen heatsink fan assembly with the RGB LEDs. And the funny thing is, this is a much better cooler than the ones that they would provide with the Ryzen 5 2400G. Yeah, those things they're like half the size of this, and have aluminum base and not this copper slug in the center. Now, of course, I used the factory supplied heatsink fans with those APUs from the systems I upgraded over the past couple of years, the Ryzen 3 2200G and the Ryzen 5 2400G. But if it was my own personal system, I would probably use a little better cooler. That way, I'd have some overclocking headroom sometime down the line. Now, I don't plan on overclocking this, at least not right now. But one day, might come a time where I need to squeeze a little extra performance out of it, like I did with the current Black Max. Yeah, I did overclock it a little bit as far as I could get it. And it seemed to make for a little bit of improvement, but it's time for it to go. Time for something much better. And here's something I definitely like about the newer AMD heatsink fan assemblies is they tend to make use of the factory backplate. Either they use the clips or you pull the front pieces off and you utilize the factory backplate. So for example, the CPU wall block that's in the MidTower Deluxe, it uses this kind of installation setup. And also these newer Ryzen heatsink fans also tend to use that as well. Definitely it's definitely something I do like. In comparison to some of these older Intel setups I've been working with from the Socket 775 era, where, and also newer, to where one heatsink fan assembly uses a different backplate than the other. So you'd have to take your motherboard out just to change out the backplate unless your case offers the hole. Since this cooler still has the factory thermal paste on there, we're going to just go ahead and make use of that. Make sure the cable, yep, it can reach. Make sure it can reach. That's always important. I'm just going to set that down in place like that. I'm going to plug in our CPU fan. And also we're going to connect the RGB LED header. Which goes in the side right here. And there's a header right here on the motherboard for that. And so hopefully got that in the right direction. I'll have to tidy up these cables once I get everything into the system. Now I'll go ahead and install the memory. Yeah, that's the funny thing about these newer AceRock boards is the DDR4 memory slots only have one notch. It's only on this side. You get that Gigabyte X570 board has them on both sides. So it looks like we have two different memory kits. They're identical though. These were originally a 2 times 4 gigabyte kits, so it should be a total of 16 gigabytes. So the Black Max will be getting a memory upgrade out of all this too, because it currently has 8 gigs has 8 gigs of RAM in it. Okay, memory's installed. So next we'll install the M.2 SSD. So this is the 240 gigabyte M.2 drive that was from the MidTower Deluxe. It was installed when I upgraded the MidTower Deluxe back in late 2017 to the Ryzen 7 1700X setup. As mentioned earlier, I was given that Samsung 1 terabyte M.2 drive, so that freed up the old SSD from the MidTower Deluxe. So we're going to be installing it into the Black Max. So as I mentioned earlier, I upgraded the MidTower Deluxe Black Max to an SSD, and it's also a well, this is actually a 256 gigabyte. Okay, so I installed, I think it's a 240 gig SSD into the Black Max about 2 years ago. I think it's 240 gigabyte Samsung SSD. So what we're going to be doing is when we upgrade this setup, we're just going to we're going to briefly install that SSD. That way we can get everything set up and also transfer the data over from that SSD to this one. Pretty straightforward. So they gave us 2 screws with this board. Okay, so that's been installed. So now the motherboard, APU, and RAM, everything's ready to get installed into the Black Max. Okay, everybody. Now we got the Black Max in for service. The loaner computer has been sent over to my parents, and now we're ready to go and start upgrading this thing. So this is what's currently in here right now. It's an ASRock FM2 A78 Pro 3 Plus motherboard, along with a AMD A6 6420K 4 GHz socket FM2 processor. I do think so. I do have a small overclock on the CPU. I think it's at like 4.2 or something like that. Real small overclock, just enough to try to beef its performance up just a hair bit. But this setup is definitely showing its age. The A series APUs, they just never were really all that powerful to begin with. I mean, at first when they came out, they were nice, but the Ryzen APUs are a whole lot better. Of course, as y'all probably know, I've built a handful of systems using the Ryzen 3 2200G and the Ryzen 5 2400G APUs for a local business here, and they've been very pleased with the setup. It packs a whole lot better punch than this right here. Matter of fact, that business, I think they have a couple of A6 systems still in operation that I refurbished at the time I did the upgrades for the rest of the machines. Of course, this is the Black Max, my parents' computer. As you mentioned, it has 8 gigs of DDR3 memory on there. The new setup we're going with is going to have 16 gigs of memory. And the new motherboard is a ASRock B450 Pro 4. So this motherboard here, for example, is kind of similar to the current setup we're putting in here. It was probably one of the more basic full-size boards you could get on Newegg at the time. Definitely had some room for expansion and stuff like that. You can see it was kind of overkill for a setup. You can see, for example, the 8-pin CPU power connector up there. This little APU I think pulls like 65 watts, so kind of overkill for that. Generally, CPUs over 95 watts is where you would really want to have those 8 pins in use. So yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this board. After I pull it out, I might use it to do another system build. Maybe I'll go on Fleabay so I can find me a more high-end A series APU to throw on it. But for my parents, I wanted to get them the Ryzen setup. I wanted to give them the Ryzen treatment. So that being said, the power supply we have in here is an old but good Hypro 300 watt. This is actually a pull of an HP system. This is an HP D3057F3R. These things were nearly bulletproof. The only issues they have are capacitors. As a matter of fact, this one's going to need a recap. So I'm going to pull it out and replace the caps in it. There's a few. What it is these power supplies, they built them really well, except for the brand of capacitors they chose. They chose to use TPO capacitors instead of a better brand like, let's say, Panasonic or Rubicon or one of them brands. But yeah, these things are definitely. There's one site out there, I think it's Hardware Insights. One of the sites that has a power supply tester where they load test these power supplies. They load tested one of these things, and it not only did the stickered amount, but it did way over. It actually, they were actually able to get 400 watts out of this thing. The only issue was if they tried to pull any more, the power supply would cut off because it was getting too hot. So yeah, these Hypros, if you can get your hands on one, I mean, they're pretty nice. So I'm going to actually repair this unit. It's working fine, by the way. The Black Max was running just fine, but just want to go ahead and replace those bulging caps in there. That way this thing could run for many more years. So inside here, you may see we have there's our hard drive, which is a 1 terabyte drive, and above that is I think it's a 240 gig solid state drive, and this is standard 2.5 inch SATA SSD. We're going to be pulling that out, and we're going to be upgrading to the M.2. So what I have to do is, once I get all the new stuff in here, we're going to have to briefly plug up this SSD. That way we can get everything set up and then clone this over to the M.2 drive that's on the board. Okay, everybody, so I just got the power supply repaired. There was only 2 caps in it that were actually bulging, and I figured with the power supply being as old as it is, the thing with TPO capacitors is some of them fail, some of them don't. I mean, I've got some units that have TPO caps in them that are still going fine after all these years. But I figured with the power supply been going this long and only those 2 caps have failed, I figured I'd just go ahead and change out those 2 that were bulging and just leave the other ones in. And in the future, if I had to replace other ones, I'll just do a full recap if necessary. So it's just the 2 caps on the 12-volt rail. So got it back up running so that way I can show you the specs on it before I upgrade it. I was wrong about the overclock. I thought it was like 4.1 or 4.2. No, it's actually 4.6. I had this thing overclocked to 4.6 gigahertz. Now it's running at like 1.8 right now because it's running in a low power state. But when it cranks up, you can see the multiplier goes up to 46. So 4.6 gigahertz. So if I pull up Task Manager, you can see right here to tell you the base speed, 4.6. Now here's another thing. You know, I mentioned in a recent video about how the AMD FX 8120 8-core processor was kind of a scam because it wasn't technically a 8-core processor, but rather a 4-core. Well, the A6 APUs, they're kind of in that same area in a way when you think about it. Now I can't say for certain that this was claiming to be a dual core APU, but I think at the time they were stating it was a dual core, but it's got 1 core and 2 logical processors. Whereas, for example, the Ryzen 7 1700X is an 8-core processor with 16 threads. If that makes any sense. So these AMD APUs, the A series APUs, they're definitely better than the E series, but the A series APUs, they just weren't very powerful in my opinion. Now here's something else I've noticed about these APUs, and I've built a few systems with these particular APUs. Is it seems like their on die thermal sensors read way high. For example, it says it's running at 50 degrees Celsius at idle and 66 degrees Celsius at max load. Yeah, that's kind of crazy when you can compare it to the motherboard sensor, which reads like 33 degrees Celsius to 34. I mean, well, 29 to 34. So you can see. Now it is normal for the core temp to be a little bit over the motherboard sensor temp, but when you look at the cooling that we have on here, it's got a massive heat pipe cooler on it. Now, not massive, but it's got a decent sized heat pipe cooler with a lot of fans, a lot of contact area for air to move across, and it's always done very good at cooling. But this CPU has always read high. It's been that way since I got it. And there's at least 2 other systems I have built using these A series APUs, and they also read high like that too. No matter what you did with the cooling. Anyways, I think that wraps up for the old configuration, so it's time to go ahead and tear this thing down. Okay, everybody, so first thing I'm going to do is pull out the hard drive as well as the solid state drive. I'm going to pull out the SSD because, of course, we're going to be migrating over to the M.2 SSD on the new motherboard. But in this case, you also have to take out any hard drives to get the motherboard out. That's because the BlackMax is in I guess what I call a condensed MidTower. It's a MidTower case. However, it's not as long from front to rear as your typical MidTower. I do like this design. It helps it. I mean, this machine, it doesn't take up quite as much room on a desk because of that. But when you go to service it, it can be a real pain. Especially when you have a full-size ATX motherboard. Now this is a full size, however it's not quite as wide as your typical full-size ATX board. They come in a few different sizes. This is probably, I'd say, a more preferred style motherboard for this case. And the replacement board uses the same dimensions just about, so we'll go ahead and take out these drives. I'm also going to do a backup of the drive as well. I just try to do a backup every time anytime I get this thing to work on, I just go and do a backup of it to keep. That way, if something ever happens to the computer, parents have a backup of their files. Yeah, I probably should have checked the health of the hard drive while I had it in there, because this is actually a warranty replacement hard drive from Seagate. This it's a 1 terabyte drive. This was back from when I had 2 1 terabyte drives in the MidTower Deluxe and a 2 terabyte backup drive. This is back when Seagate drives were still horribly unreliable. Back when almost every drive you get from them, you had to RMA it at some point because it would fail. That was the case with me. I had to return a crap ton of Seagate drives. Amazingly, I don't think I've had to return nearly. I've hardly ever had to issue RMAs on other branded drives, but Seagate's, they were pretty bad. I'm not sure if they've gotten better since, because I have not used Seagate hard drives in my builds for probably the past 7 years, 6 years, something like that. I got away from them after I had so many problems with their products. And so, for example, the MidTower Deluxe, it has my important data drives are all Hitachis, and I got a white label generic as a backup drive. So the SSD has to come out too, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, so now I got the drives pulled out. Now we're going to disconnect all the connectors in here. So in addition to replacing the motherboard with the Ryzen setup, we're also going to give the Black Max some RGB treatment. Yeah, we're going to actually install some RGB LEDs in this thing. For those wondering, yes, the MidTower Deluxe will be getting RGB. I got some stuff planned for it. I plan to retrofit the front bubble lamps on the front of the case with RGB. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do all 4 LEDs or if I'm going to do just the bottom 2 LED, the upper 2 blue. That's still up in the air. Anyways, for those curious, yes, it's coming. It'll happen. Yeah, the dang audio connector popped out earlier when I was just trying to move these cables just a hair bit, and it broke the edge of the connector. However, the terminals for the Dunlop connectors are still there, so at least for the metal terminals, they're still intact, so the connector is still usable. I could replace it if I had to. So yeah, everything but these 2 drives, the card reader and the power supply is coming out. Even the old cold cathode lamp is coming out. The fans are staying. Hopefully, the new motherboard will support 3-pin fans. I notice everything's going to 4-pin, which is kind of, I mean, I can see why, but it doesn't make sense for retail motherboard manufacturers to remove support for 3-pin fans, considering there's still many of them out in service. Going to check out the modem card here. Yes, this computer has a modem, and I think I described why earlier. If I didn't, or if you didn't catch me talking about it, the reason why this machine has a fax modem in it is, for one, so that way my mom can send a fax if necessary. But here's the other thing. My parents have software on this machine. It's called W7 Caller ID. We originally had it for the old TV computers that we had years ago. But the reason why we kept it on here is because it has a very convenient call blocking software. You can put in phone numbers from... if you start getting random phone number calls all the time from telemarketers and stuff like that, it logs the phone numbers, and you can go back and actually you can add them to a block list. So what it does is, when the incoming call comes in, this fax modem picks up the phone and hangs it up. So basically the Black Max hangs up on telemarketers. That's very convenient. So I ended up having to purchase a PCI Express fax modem, which cost me about $30 off Amazon. Newegg didn't seem to have any. I bought the motherboard from Newegg, but I looked to see if they had any PCI Express fax modems, and I mean, it's kind of hard to find. It's because it's combining an old technology with a newer technology. However, some OEM computers did come with fax modems with PCI Express. One's in the MidTower Deluxe right now. Yeah, the MidTower Deluxe also has a fax modem in it. But no, we don't use dial-up. So, pull this out. I want to say this was installed probably in 2008 when I originally built the Black Max. Yeah, so the Black Max is only the Black Max chassis is only a year newer than the MidTower Deluxe. For those who didn't know. I'm gonna pop the zip tie here. Okay, so the cold cathode setup is out. Now what I gotta do is take the motherboard out. Okay, so I'm gonna pull out this motherboard. Make sure everything's out of the way here. Okay, now that's out of the way, we'll go ahead and get the replacement motherboard. Okay, so go ahead and carefully install the new shield plate. So I forgot to mention in the previous section of this video that, of course, I did mention that I had another socket AM4 board on hand, a Gigabyte X570 Gaming X board. I mentioned how one of the big reasons why I didn't use that board for this was because that motherboard was really more marketed for a higher end system, but also that motherboard on the rear only has for video connectivity just one HDMI port, whereas this motherboard, this B450 Pro 4 ASRock, has a VGA, a display port, as well as an HDMI port on the back. And this board also sports a USB Type-C port, which the Gigabyte board does not. So my dad, he recently got a new phone which has Type-C, and my mom is going to be probably getting a new phone sooner or later that's going to have a Type-C port. So it'd be a good idea to have a motherboard that has a Type-C port built in. Okay, so I'm just doing a quick look over of this board to make sure that all of the standoffs are in the right spot, and they are. So we can go ahead and drop this in. As mentioned, this motherboard is practically the same style board as what came out as far as dimensions goes. Okay, so we're going to get this bolted in. Okay, motherboard's been bolted in, so now we can go and start plugging stuff up. The first thing I'm wondering is our fans. So last time I upgraded this thing, I had to extend the wiring of the fan leads to reach the chassis fan headers on the motherboard, and looks like these are in practically the same spot. So one's got to make a super long reach, and the other one can plug in right over here. And what I can do is I can zip tie those cables out of the way where they're not just right exactly out in the open, but here's that. Now we're going to install our PCI Express modem card. So in case you're wondering, that little modem card comes with a little bitty software CD, a slip of directions or key features, okay. They also give you a mini-sized expansion slot cover and a phone cord. None of which we'll need. We're going to need an extra expansion slot cover since we took out the switch for the cold cathode lamps. Just pop that in here right here. Okay, so now we're going to try to start tightening up cables a little bit, but first let's go ahead and get our drives installed. So we're only installing the hard drive this time. We're going to leave the SSD loose, but we'll connect it up. That way we can boot the system and also set it up and transfer the data off the old SSD over to the M.2 SSD. Okay, now that the motherboard is installed and most of the connections have been made to the motherboard, we'll go ahead and install our drives, which we're only installing the hard drive. The SSD, the old SSD, is going to remain loose, though we will connect it up. That way we can get everything configured and also transfer the data off the old SSD to the M.2 drive. Once that's completed, we can go ahead and remove the old SSD from the system entirely. I popped the zip tie here because the power connector on this motherboard is up higher than the other one, so the SATA cables were kind of tied up. The SATA power connectors were kind of tied up into here. This power supply offers it offers 2 SATA connectors as well as 4 Molex. I do have a Molex to SATA adapter up here on the 2 optical drives. I mean, this is pretty expected for a 2006 power supply. SATA was coming out, and at the time, at that time, hard drives were mostly getting power from the SATA interface, and CD drives were still mostly IDE. It wasn't until about a couple years later that, 1 or 2 years later, that SATA DVD drives and CD drives really started to catch on. So we'll just have to We'll have to tidy up the cables here in a little bit once while this is done. Okay, so the SSD is done. We've copied all the files, so I can go ahead and disconnect it. Again, we're not installing it back into the system, though we're just going to plug it up. Use this different SATA cable. This motherboard has two outward-facing SATA cable connectors, which is a good thing. So actually, before I even plug up the this old SSD, we're going to actually test this thing out. Now, before I actually power it up, let's go ahead and install our RGB strip. Why not? Let's go ahead and get it in there. Now, this stuff has adhesive on the back of it, but let's see here. So it looks like we'll have to cover this end up a little bit with some tape, electrical tape. Yeah, this is some RGB stuff I got from work about a couple years ago. It's a box full of random stuff. And also I received a donation of some RGB stuff, including a little standalone controller. I find that very useful for testing RGB stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and cover this end up with some tape here. Just got to cover the bottom of it up. Now before I actually go to stick this in the case, I got to make sure that this is the I got to make sure this cable is in fact, this RGB LED strip is in fact good, because I remember I had one that was kind of faulty. This motherboard has a RGB header conveniently placed right at the bottom. Now if I could line it up, that'd be great. There we are. So I have plenty enough cable to to span the bottom of this whole case. You know, once needs, you can actually shorten it if you find it necessary. It's got little spots where you can cut it with a pair of scissors, actually. So I may end up trimming some off if necessary. But for now, I'm just going to sit it in here and just see what we get. Okay, so this one connector here, that goes to the front fans, which is not a real big deal for now. It just runs two front front fans at 5 volts, so that it blows us a little bit of air across the hard drive. Okay, let's go ahead and test this thing. Okay, everybody, it's time for the first power on. Let's see what we get. Okay, everybody, it's running. I'm not sure what the deal was there for a second. You saw where I pressed the power button and it shut off twice. But I think it was just setting everything up. Motherboards can do some weird things when you first start them up for the very first time. Um, but look at this. Look at the RGB animation. It's already pre-adjusted the fan speeds and everything, fresh out of box. I haven't touched anything yet. It already knows. It's already detected the type of fans that are running, and it's running them at low speed. This is cool. This is really cool. Yeah, my mom, she is going to have a fit when she sees this thing. Anyways, here we are. This is the UEFI utility. I've got so much junk on the desk right now, it's a nightmare. So here we are. It's detecting all 16 gigs of memory. It's detecting our APU, the Ryzen 5 2400G, 3.6 gigahertz. And this thing does offer overclock settings. As mentioned earlier in the video, I'm not going to be overclocking this thing anytime soon. Though sometime down the line I might do it in the future. Just kind of like I did with the previous Black Mac setup. So this is a very this is a very decent UEFI utility. It gives you a lot of customizations, and it gives you a lot of stuff to be able to configure here. So it's already applied. Like I say, it applied by itself the fan settings. You can change this. There's silent mode, standard mode, performance mode, and full speed. We're going to leave it on standard. Let's see how warm the CPU heatsink's getting. It's just a tad bit warm. So we know we are getting thermal transfer. And of course, when the fan runs slower like that, you're going to get warmer temps. So that's to be expected. Even at the low speed, this particular fan is pushing a good bit of air. So yeah, I'm impressed already. And this is you can adjust. I really do like this here. You can go in and adjust the fan speeds to however you like. Matter of fact, on the MidTower Deluxe, I have a custom fan curve set up on it. So I'm just going to go ahead and exit out of this. And fan tuning. This is a whole separate one. I'm just going to hit cancel on that. Secure boots disabled. Now, of course, as mentioned, we don't have the we don't have the old SSD hooked up yet, so we can't boot in anything. Now we really don't have to have that enabled, since the Windows installation is actually UEFI now. That's how I had it set up. The only thing I'm wondering is I don't see the M.2 drive in here. So I have to wonder if it's picking it up or not. That's something I have to look into here in a little bit. Anyways, it's running. So now all I gotta do is go in here and finish tightening up cables and stuff like that, and we're going from there. Okay, everybody. I must say it was last night was very, very eventful. You can see that I've installed software on the Black Macs to customize the RGB LEDs, and boy does it look cool. So last night I noticed, I pulled up Crystal Disk Info and noticed that the hard drive in here that stores the data was on the verge of calling it quits. It had a caution flag for bad sectors. So I went to back it up, and there were a few select files that were so corrupted it couldn't even read them. It would just, when you were doing a copy and paste, File Explorer would just stall at 0 kilobits per second. I mean, it would drop to 0 and it's not do anything. So there was a few files, and it was actually mostly in downloads, so it wasn't really important stuff. But yeah, I had to sit here and watch this thing copy files, and anytime it come across a bad file, I had to go in and either delete that file or copy everything but the bad file. Luckily, there was only a few files that were affected. Most of the stuff I was able to recover just fine. But yeah, this comes to show that hard drive failures can really sneak up on you. So this hard drive, which was a warranty replacement for a already failed hard drive, is failing. Typical Seagate. They're garbage. I mean, I got a little motto, I guess I can say. If you like data loss and having to back up your files and restore your files and replace hard drives, just buy Seagate products, because you'll be doing lots of that. These things, I'm not sure how the brand new ones are, but at least these from around the late 2000s to early mid 2010s, they're horrible. I mean, this one was manufactured in 2013. I'm going to assume that was probably the date that it would the date that it was refurbished and repaired by Seagate. You can see right there, recertified on the bottom, and you might be able to see that. But yeah, it's just I don't ever foresee myself ever buying Seagate hard drives ever again. I mean, they're garbage. So, anyways, I installed a Western Digital drive that I had on hand. It actually came out of a hard drive enclosure, so it's actually not a really fantastic drive. It's actually a green power drive that I think it only runs at like 5,400 RPMs. And it's actually, I recently realized it's actually a SATA 150 drive, although it's actually not from that generation. It's because it came out of a hard drive enclosure or a USB enclosure. Would be pretty slow if you ran this as your primary boot drive, but for a data drive, it seems to be just fine. This drive actually runs a lot faster than that one, because that one there is in such poor condition. And also the power supply. You remember in the previous clip where when I went to turn this thing on, it blinked on and off. Well, that wasn't the motherboard configuring itself. That was the power supply. Apparently, the capacitors I put in this thing on the 12 volt rail, power supply is not getting along with them. So I'm going to have to do another recap on this thing. I'm just going to go ahead and order some capacitors, because I need to order some new caps anyway. These are a slightly lower value than what came out of it, and I think that may have something to do with it. The caps that were in there were 2200 microfarads, and I stuck in 1800s. I did that one other time, and that power supply works fine, but this one here doesn't seem to like it. You can literally press the power button on a computer and keep starting it, and eventually it'll stay on, but that's not ideal. So I replaced that power supply with one of my cherry red power supplies. Those who have been long-time viewers may recognize these things. I have two of them. One's installed on the Plexi, and this is the other one. So I bought these two units off of Newegg back in 2009 for $25 each. No, these aren't real featherweight cheap in units. They actually have quite a bit of heft to them. The only problem I had with these two was capacitors. Both of them have been recapped. This one here only has about a year of service on it. So this was the one that was installed in the MidTower Deluxe from, I want to say, May or June 2009 through mid-2010. So a little over a year of service on this unit. That's the only amount of service it's ever had. It's set in its original box, which I have it on the floor here. I still kept the original box to it, and I had it stored in its original box from 2010 to 2020. So I pulled it out, tested it, installed it. It works fine. That one back there, it's got a lot more hours on it. It actually, I bought both these around the same time. That one there got installed into the Black Max. And this computer, from 2009 through, I want to say 2012. And it's sat in storage until 2017, late 2017, when I rebuilt the Plexi, and that's where it's been ever since. Both have been recapped, as I mentioned. I replaced the rear fan on that one. This one still has its original fan. But yeah, these power supplies, I don't think I've ever seen a power supply look so much like a fire truck red, or cherry red. I always call these things cherry red units. Anyways, aside from that, things are working fine now with the Black Max. I think my mom is going to have a fit when she sees this thing with the alternating colors and stuff. I think it looks pretty cool. And the Black Max has always been an eye catcher anytime somebody comes to my parents' house to visit or whatever. Even the Spectrum guy made remarks on the computer. I happened to be there because they were, I was over there helping my parents with cable issues, and the Spectrum guy came and he saw the computer he was going to ask about it and said, "Yeah, I built it." I said, "That's my parents' rig." I said, "If you think that one's cool, you should see my own system." And of course, I showed him a picture off my phone. But yeah, the Black Max is now Ryzen powered. It's got a Ryzen 5 2400G. And it should definitely be a lot better than what it was previously. So anyways, I think that wraps up for this video. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Well, everybody, that's it for this video. But don't forget, there's a lot more interesting stuff on the channel to check out. Also, if this is your first time visiting this channel, feel free to subscribe to keep your channel. And also, don't forget to tick the bell so that way you'll get notified of new video posts. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. But if you really didn't like it, there is the alternative option available as well. Also, feel free to check out my second channel, CubeComp MTDX. There you'll find videos about bicycling, weather, elevator tours, and all sorts of other neat, interesting stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to come back, and thank you for your support.